Okay, good morning all. I think we'll get started and let everybody else that's going to join trickle in here. So good morning, buenos dias, buenas tardes, bon dia, bonjour. That's all the languages I have for today, but thank you everyone for joining and welcome to the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance's flagship webinar on the power of post-event reviews, or PERCs, as we like to call them. So before turning the microphone over to the speakers that we have lined up for today, I wanted to first provide a quick overview for those that aren't part of the Alliance, for what the Alliance is, and then what we'll be covering today. So the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance is a multi-sectoral partnership that's focused on finding practical ways to help communities in developed and developing countries around the world strengthen their resilience to flood risk. And the Alliance consists of 9 partner organizations, which you can see here. And you can find out more information about the Alliance on that link that I've posted there at our Flood Resilience portal. And some of what the Alliance offers, there's a couple solutions that I have here. One is the Flood Resilience Measurement for Communities, which is a tool and framework that is fully integrated into community programming. It helps support decision-making and informs solutions and designing solutions. It supports impact measurement, and it supports generating data for empirical evidence on flood resilience. And there's also information on that link that I shared on the previous slide about that tool there. And then the other solution that the Alliance offers, which we're going to dive into detail here today, is our post-event review capability methodology, or PERC. And the goal for the webinar today is really that we hope that you will walk away with a broad understanding of what the PERC is and the value that it has provided to teams who have used it. So where we're going today. First, we'll hear from Karen McClune, who will provide a broad overview of what the PERC is. And then we'll hear from people who have implemented it in the field. So we have our stories from the field section from Mozambique, Mexico, and Senegal, and then we'll conclude with a question and answer. We will keep all the questions for the end of the webinar, so if you do have any as people are presenting, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll keep track of them and make sure that we capture that at the end during that session. But to start, we wanted to kind of get a sense of who here may have heard of the post-event review capability before. So John is going to share that poll now.
Hi everyone, you should be able to see the poll now either in the chat or as a pop-up window on your screen.
And I actually can't see the poll, so
I will facilitate. So we have 26 responses too far, and yeah, I will give people like 30 more seconds to answer, or 20 more seconds to answer.
Great.
So we have 35 responses so far, and out of these 35, 54% of the people actually said they heard about PERC before, and 46% now said they haven't heard about it yet. So I think we have quite a balanced and mixed picture here, which is quite cool.
Great. Thank you, John. So yeah, hopefully for those that have heard about this, we go into a little bit more detail and you learn something new about, learning from our colleagues in the field and how they've used it. And for those that have never heard about it before, we hope this gets you really excited about learning more about the tool and maybe using it in the future. So I'll now turn it over to Karen McClune, who is the Executive Director of ISET International, which is a partner organization of the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance and is based in Boulder, Colorado in the USA. Karen, it's all you.
Yay.
Great, thanks, Rachel. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of what the PERC is as a methodology. And we're happy to field more questions in the question and answer session. So it's an approach to learn from disasters, basically. Our goal was, with the PERC, was primarily focused on, well, if these events are natural, they're natural hazards. You know, we get floods, we get hurricanes. Why do some of them become major disasters and others are not? So the goal is really with the PERC to go in and understand that question. What made this particular natural hazard event become a disaster? The approach we use with the PERC to get answers to that question are primarily interviews with people across scales and across sectors. And that's one of the things that makes the PERC quite different. In a post-disaster environment, there are a lot of groups that are doing after-action reviews, but they're always very narrow. They're very sector-focused. They're very contained to what a particular group does in a disaster setting. And there are very few people that are looking broadly across sectors and across scales. And with the PERC, we work from the household all the way up to national and international response. And one of the things that allows us to do is often things work or don't work within a particular space or silo or sector or scale. But it's where those pieces then are trying to connect up with other pieces where gaps open up. And so the PERC really helps us understand both what's working, but also where there are gaps like that opening up. And that gives us a way to learn from a disaster event that isn't it's atypical. And we've found that it's really powerful. However, because it is highly qualitative, it's interview-based, supplemented by written material, it's very broad, it doesn't go really deep, typically. It's much more of that bird's eye view. It could. One certainly could dive down into detail, and we have. But in general, it's more of that big picture. How does this all add up? And then using that information, we tell a story. And we try to make it a very accessible story because there are a lot of people in a post-disaster environment that are struggling with, well, so why? Why did this happen? Why did that happen? And someone who can come in and tell a compelling story about, well, these are the things that happened, and this is how it added up, and this is why it didn't really work out quite the way we expected, or it worked better than we expected. And then drawing from that, we provide recommendations. And those recommendations are both where were there gaps that are actually very actionable, and we try to focus in on the pieces that are very actionable, but also where were there really unexpected or expected successes that can be built on. Next slide. So we've conducted at this point about 19 PERCs across the world. In this figure, this is where the Alliance as a whole is working. The green bands are where we are working and have also conducted PERCs. And then in addition, we've done a number of PERCs in Western Europe, in Morocco, and then there are a couple of PERCs that you hear about today in Mexico and in Senegal that aren't on this map, and Bangladesh, which is not on this map yet. And we also have a couple of PERCs currently ongoing in Germany and Kuwait that are not on this map. But we've applied this very broadly. We've applied it both in rural and urban settings. And we've primarily conducted PERCs on flood events, but very broadly. on hurricanes, on pluvial flooding, rainfall-induced flooding, on riverine flooding, on flash flooding. So it's a very flexible methodology, and we've conducted 3 PERCs at this point on wildfires. And so the PERCs in Canada, in Tasmania, and one of the US PERCs have all looked at wildfires. So it's a quite adaptive methodology. Next slide. We started doing PERCs much more as a sort of research piece, and our initial PERC manual was a bit more researchy. Increasingly, however, we're integrating the PERC into the broader Alliance work, in part because we're finding that this type of really broad brush learning really nicely complements the baseline assessments that we're conducting using our flood resilience measurement for communities approach. And so with the deep dive into communities and understanding their needs and contexts and vulnerabilities and capacities that the flood resilience measurement provides, the PERC then really complements that nicely with, so what's going on in the country more broadly, that this is sort of a microcosm of, and how can we put this together to then influence policy, spending, decision-making. Part of why the PERC really supports that is because it pushes people out of their silos. The fact that we're looking across sectors means that both we learn across sectors, and we can push other people to think a little across sectors as we talk with them. And that in turn then lets us think differently, see things differently, frame things a little differently, and really get a better systemic picture of how these disasters are playing out and what that means for challenges and entry points. Next slide. So you will hear from our 3 speakers who are in the process or have recently conducted PERCs around what they've found valuable. From the perspective of having conducted multiple PERCs, what I have found valuable is that it is not sector specific, that it does give that holistic, that systemic viewpoint across sectors and levels, which no one else is really doing. And so we do come up with a different perspective on disasters as a result. It can be used as evidence in areas where data is lacking, which is super powerful, as I'm sure many of you know on this call. It provides an avenue for people to tell their story. And often when we conduct these interviews, we go in and say, so from your perspective as, an engineer who's building levees, or as a homeowner, or as a small business owner, as someone in the local government, what happened during this event? And often that's it. We then listen for an hour. And what's interesting about this is if you go in with a set of questions, you don't always hear what's most important to people. And so this very qualitative, very open methodology takes a little practice to learn how to use, but it really quickly opens up what matters to people, what happened that was a problem. And so it's quite fast. And that in turn gives us a different picture that can be very powerful in influencing the advocacy that we do, how we reach out to people, the information we have to share with them. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the folks who've actually been doing this on the ground, because I think you'll be really excited to hear what they have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. So before we dive into our stories from the field bit, we did have another poll question for you all, just based on what Karen has shared. So John will put that into the chat, and that should pop up for you as well, but I'll read it in case the text is cut off. So the question is, what part of the PERC are you most interested in? The methodology, how it can be used for advocacy, how it can be used for programming, the recommendations and insights, or how much effort is involved, and finally, its capacity building potential. And John, I can actually see it now, so thank you. So we'll wait a few more See, it's getting updated as we speak. Great, thank you all. So it looks like 25% of us are interested in the recommendations and insights. And I will be sharing a link at the end of the webinar where you can find all of the PERC products, which include those recommendations and insights. And then we have some are interested in how it can be used for programming, which we will get into here a little bit today. And then the methodology, there's also a manual online at that link that I'll share at the end. Thank you all for filling that out. Okay, so we'll now dive into the stories. And to start, we will have Manuel Aron from Mozambique. He is the National Disaster Management Coordinator with the IFRC in Mozambique.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar series. My name is Manuel Aron, and I'm from IFRC Mozambique. And I'm here today to share with you a story of a PERC that we conducted in Mozambique. This PERC that we conducted was linked with the ZEFRA program, which is the one that we are now discussing in this webinar. And then we are going to focus more what are the insights that we gather from the contacts that we made with our community. But before the kickoff, I was really interested to bring a bit of the context of the Mozambique country, and also a bit of a context of Idai cyclone that actually hit the country in 2019. So Mozambique is a country which is pretty much located, in a southern Africa side, and then it faces Indian Oceans, and it has, let's say, around 28,000 kilometers of coastline. So this means a lot when it comes to disasters related to the cyclones and floods. So this is a small picture that can give us an overview how Mozambique is very prone to disasters. And as we may be aware, this cyclone Idai actually hit the country in 2019, and it made around 603 people dead. And also, this is one of the country that is experienced, the disasters almost every year. And then since, the Idai actually hit the country, if we look at the historic data, none of those disasters can be compared to Idai. Idai made a very huge impact in terms of damage, and then on the peoples and their livelihood. So if you look at those image that we've prepared for you, you can see on the right corner the Mozambique map and how the trajectory of Cyclone Idai have made into the country, and then those impacts can also be seen on our slides. So most importantly is that the Mozambique is a home for about 32 million people. So when it comes to disasters, you can have an idea how many people can be affected and can be impacted with the disaster. So this is Mozambique, and then I'm going to ask for the next slide, please. So why the PERC matter? In our review that we conducted in Mozambique, especially in Beira, we realized that since the Mozambique has experienced a lot of disasters, the Idai or Cyclone Idai was the most, the most remembered with people and the community members. We believe and then we see PERC as a very powerful tool because it gives us a unique opportunity, to learn from the community and from their fresh experiences regarding to the disasters and regardless to the cyclone itself that actually hit the country in Mozambique. And then from there, we managed to learn what went well and also what need to be improved and what are the challenges that we need to consider, for the building disaster resilience program and also to build the resilience itself in the community level. So another point that we believe, and then we consider that is really important when it comes to PERC, is that it provides a very practical insight from the community itself. And then based on those insights, we managed to make some changes in our program and our approaches regarding to building resilience in the community. So we've got a couple of examples there. During our community selection process that we did in Mozambique, especially in the Buzi district, a lot of community members, they were complaining about, lack of assembly points for them to, to find a safe place when it comes to those kind of events. So one of the special elements of this cyclone Idai is that it came with a very strong wind, and then it was compounded with a flood. So after the wash up of the cyclone, people was also see their home and their livelihood being vanished by the floods during the same period of time. So it was completely compound, and that's why everyone actually have something to say when they consider to share some experience regarding to the cyclone or disaster that they face. The most importantly as well in the PERC review is that we can actually disclose, some local practice that community can actually took as their own initiative. We've got some of examples that we can actually see in Mozambique, especially in district of Buzi and some or other districts of Beira. People themselves, without any assistance of expertise and without an assistance of government, they are taking initiative to put extra layer in their door and windows when they hear about coming of a cyclone or other event related to the wind and a very heavy rain. So this for us is a very critical element to consider, because people are sharing with us their own understanding and their own initiative based on their experience and based on their practice. So today it's common to see if someone decided, or someone having information regarding to the upcoming event, the people, they can mobilize themselves within the community and to put, to reinforce all the elements of their livelihoods and their houses. So today you can see people, putting a bag of sand, for instance, on the top of their houses in the roof to ensure that if the cyclone or other strong wind can actually come, it can reduce at least the impact of of the damage of those events. So those are specific, initiatives that we can learn from the community, and then we can also share our expertise and experience, and together we can, reinforce and strengthen the resilience building element that we consider as very important for us to be ready and prepared for the next disaster that may come. And then the last point that we consider for this webinar, and I think that is really interesting to share with all of you, is that, people also made that the comment related to the assistance, because most of the time we consider that, okay, there is those humanitarian organizations that are going to come and save us. But at the end, through the PERC that we conduct, we realize that they say that, all right, the humanitarian can take more than 72 hours to reach us. So what we can do as a community members, and then they decide, and then they ask for the government and also for us as the program, to share with them capacity elements so that they can build their own capacity to withstand to those kind of disasters and to withstand, the event of this magnitude. IDI was really extraordinary because they made, there was kind of a mindset changer. Even now, let's say the 3 years after the IDI actually hit the country, up to now, everyone has some story to tell. And they're the one actually sharing their own story, and then they're asking us to build a local committee for disaster management, not only at the community level, but also at the schools level, so that children can have an opportunity for them to start learning about preparedness, about disaster response, and about building resilience. So for us, that was very helpful. And that's why we understand that PERC really matter, because can make mind change, and they can also inform us to improve the way that we are driving our program and our operation, not only for the response, but also when it comes to building resilience and then making capacity building, program for, for the community. So they brought an element of, introducing the community at a school level, but also they asked for us to consider the element of having the emergency exit when it comes to emergency and when it comes to the disasters impact. So we learned a lot, and then we are glad that we are now with this opportunity to share our experience from Mozambique to the world. So this is what we've prepared for you guys, and let's move to the last slide, so just we can have the last word.
You're at time, Aaron, so if you could wrap that up, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And then for us, the PERC is an effective element and tool that can capture the fresh stories and voices for the community, so that we should keep an eyes on those, and then we should make a move to the PERC. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for joining us. Over.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it. Okay, we will now switch continents, and we will give the word to Jimena Cuevas, who is the knowledge manager at the Mexican Red Cross. Jimena, it's all you.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone for being here. I want to share and focus on what value do we saw in participating in this PERC. No? I think the first thing I want to share is the opportunities for collaboration and influences, because there is a deeper knowledge of the flood topic and a closer relationship with the stakeholders. Doing the PERC was a very interesting and collaborative exercise, because it was a team effort. In this case, the PERC team consists of the participation from the IFRC, the Zurich, Mexico, ISET, and the Mexican Red Cross at both at the Tabasco and national levels. And how we get this value, through advocacy, through knowing a deeper knowledge about the participation in the disaster risk management cycle, and last but not least, the reflection on the findings on the PERC. Next slide, Rachel, please. Okay. In the first point, in the process of the PERC, because I want to tell you that the PERC Mexico haven't been published, but in this process of doing the PERC, one thing I identified two specific things. The first is strengthening relationships with the stakeholders already know, for example, for the civil protection at the national and subnational levels, and also allow us to link across stakeholders and sector in an innovative way. For example, we strengthen and have a different relation now with the National Water Commission and the Health Department of Tabasco. Here in the screen, you can see, for example, a community training with the National Water Commission and with Civil Protection doing working about how to reduce floods and everything like that. So this is like a really innovative way for us at the community. Next, please. Other point is like we were able to map more precisely the participation of the institution at each stage of the disaster risk management cycle. For example, maybe you can't be able to read this, but here we can identify 17 institutions that participate in all in the whole process or in the whole emergency of the floods. For example, those squares in blue were the actions before the floods. The green, the squares in light green were the actions during the floods, and in the orange one were the actions after the floods. No, so we here have a map of how many institutions and how they are related in all the process. Next. And finally, the reflections on the findings. As Karen shared before, when here we have discovered new topics and different topics that we were not aware of, or that had been little explored. For example, it was like a kind of surprise for us, like the psychological care in the shelters by the health department in Tabasco. Also, the impact of river sediment extraction for flooding. That we can realize now that with that this is happen in Tabasco and will have serious consequences then. Also, this wasn't a surprise, but the access of great infrastructure in Tabasco, and because of this, we are working on an extended recommendation for a nature-based solution integration. And the last but not least, we want to highlight about the recommendations. That in this case, it's a point that I want to highlight it because of the reflections on the findings in the recommendations. We can include now anticipated outcomes and potential partners that can lead on these recommendations. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Jimena. Okay, we'll now go back to Africa and we'll pass the word to Alioune, who is the Climate Resilience Project Manager for West Africa Practical Action. Alioune?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. So I'm going to present you the PERC in Senegal. It's still under progress. We are working it with ISET. Just to give you a little bit of background for the PERC, in terms of context, we conducted this study in the city of Thiès, which is one of the most important cities in Senegal after the capital Dakar. And the 2020 flood season really affected Senegal with more than 10,000 households impacted. And after the capital city Dakar, Thiès was one of the most affected cities. And this city shared also some specificities with Dakar in terms of rapid urbanization, leading to problems in terms of urban planning and land use, but also in terms of a general context in Sahelian countries, including Senegal. We are noticing a trend in terms of climatic events, extreme climatic events, with frequent events like intense rainfalls in the Sahel area. The next slide, please. Just to talk a little bit about the underlying context of the PERC study in Senegal, when we consider the three components defined at the alliance level, namely policy, funding, and practice. At the policy level, there is still some work to really elaborate a national disaster risk reduction framework in Senegal in a context where the funding is really dedicated to response rather than prevention. And at the practice level, most initiatives really focused on gray infrastructures, and there is definitely a lack in terms of complementarities with nature-based solutions. And some people's initiatives are not always effective and sustainable. And also there is a lack in terms of capacity building for the communities to better understand climate information and the main actions they can take to prevent some disasters to happen. Next slide, please. So what did we learn from doing the PERC? We consider two main components. First of all, regarding the knowledge part, the PERC allow us to really reinforce our knowledge in terms of key issues regarding flooding, mainly early warning system and urban planning. And also the PERC really allow us in the context of CARES to really go beyond our area of intervention. I will talk about it afterwards, but we were doing the PERC at the same time at the project in CHES, the Flood Resilience Measurement for Communities project. And it allows us to go beyond our area of intervention, but also to reinforce our knowledge in terms of historical context, mainly by considering the main climatic events that happened in Senegal. Another aspect also that is really important that the PERC allow us to really build is related to the disaster risk management, where we were able to interact with some main organization working at the committee dedicated to flood management in Senegal. So we really have a better understanding in terms of organization. Another aspect that we distinguish as well is related to the methodological approach, where the PERC is really different compared to other approaches by the fact that it relied on qualitative data and really allowed us to analyze the factors of success and failure by talking with the relevant stakeholders. The next slide, please. And this will bring me to what the PERC really allow us to do in terms of a comparison with other tools and approaches. First of all, this method really allow us to go beyond the statistic by really conducting an analysis based on facts, by relying on interviews with some relevant stakeholders, with some experts, and also with the PERC, we really have a participatory approach because we are not just conducting the analysis and the report on our side, but also it's important to really exchange with the main stakeholders and the interviewees to get their perspectives on the report before sharing it. And also this method is really based on a variety in terms of data, either qualitative and quantitative by using various sources. And the last part, next slide. The last part is really dedicated, but with the value that we see when participating in a PERC. In Senegal, as I did mention, it was really particular because we just started the implementation of the flood resilience measurement for communities project in the commune of Thiès Nord. So it really allows us to go beyond our area of intervention by considering the whole city of Thiès, but also by incorporating Dakar. And this allows us in particular to really build our network with some key stakeholders I can think about the Department of Prevention and Flood Management in Senegal, some relevant NGOs also like Bread and Urbasan, our Met Office, ANASIP, and other structures in the field of research like École Polytechnique Thiès. And the last part that I want also to mention is that the PERC also really allow us to have some knowledge products for our advocacy strategy. For instance, we shared a policy brief on early warning system, but also an executive summary during the World Water Forum that took place a few weeks ago in Dakar. So over to you, Rachel. Thank you. And we are looking forward to hearing from you. And if you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you, Alioune. Okay. We now have about 12 minutes for questions. So feel free to raise your hand, or we will track the chat as well if you want to put your question in there. And I do see we have a question for Alioune from Horst about the data from different sources on your slide, Alioune. Can you specify more details on that?
Yeah, thanks. And just also to start, I want also to mention that my colleague Idrissa can also respond also and elaborate more on that if he wants. So for the data from different sources, I really wanted to mention that it's related to the desk reviews that we conducted in terms of report based on the 2020 flood season, for instance, with some quantitative analysis, but as well with some qualitative analysis from purely various fields and various organizations. For instance, with the UNDP and some other organizations that were able to produce a report based on the 2020 flood season. And also, just to mention specifically about the PERC, there is of course this the different interviews that we conducted with relevant stakeholders, really from various fields, from the research side, from the government agencies, and also by relying to some data that we collected during the project in Thiès. For instance, we organized some focus group discussion based on gender or some economic activities. Thank you.
Thanks. Idrissa, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. And I think Alioune did cover the main point, because while we talk about different source of data, it related secondary desk review we did, and also related to the qualitative data, we try to have different perspective from NGO, from researcher, and local authorities. So it was really important for us to have different perspective. It's a kind of triangulation, and data collected previously from the community was also useful to get better understanding about what's happening during the 2020 flood in Senegal, and how to have the best recommendation.
Thanks, Idrissa. Okay, I think Jen Stewart had her hand up. Jen, did you want to ask your question?
Thank you. Yes. Hi there, everybody. Just wanted to say thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and all the speakers today. Some fantastic stories. My question is about the valuable qualitative data that's been collected. And I wanted to know if some of the speakers could perhaps share their experience around the analysis part of the collecting the qualitative data. I've just completed myself a study which was very rich in qualitative data, but we found it very difficult to do the analysis of so much wonderful information. So I just wondered if there was any tips or ideas, or how people have been able to do that well in this case. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jen. Does anybody want to jump in from the country teams with their qualitative data analysis experience?
Yeah,
Jimena
maybe
or
I can,
Arun?
yeah, I can share.
Thank you.
Of course, you are going to have a lot of qualitative data because it's the first data that we collected. But I think that I don't know your process, but I think that a very good process is of course doing an outline of what you want to say in a whole analysis, and make these categories so you can look deep for each interview, for example, and then only take out what will be used for this category and this topic. No, you can't use all the information, but I think you can do like two ways. No, like the full report when you can give a general overview of all the emergency, but then you can't use not just better, but maybe use more data in the policy brief or in recommendations, because then you can focus on a specific topics. And I think here you can make this all this information worthy. I don't know if that can help you.
Thanks, Jimena. Elian, did you have something to add?
Yes, just to give our example here in Senegal, I just have to precise that we were doing a PERC light rather than the full, with around 15 interviews that we conducted. And in terms of approach, after these interviews, we also have a session with ISET, with a brainstorming to really try to identify the key themes to take into account, and by using also some tools like mind map and so on. So I think it's also a really good approach to really be able to synthesize all the qualitative data that we have. Over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Elian. Okay, we have a number of questions in, so we're trying to group them a little bit. Jimena and Elian, this is probably for you both as well. Can you talk a little bit about the time and the resourcing commitment? Just talk a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the PERC.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, Rachel, you mentioned about the time that a PERC take. Okay.
Yep, there's just kind of a question
okay.
about logistics.
Yes, okay. Okay, so in our case in Senegal, we were doing the PERC, as I mentioned, at the same time with the FRMC project. So at certain point, it was a little bit challenging, and we had also to pause the FRMC process to really focus on the PERC, because we really depend on the availability of the main stakeholders to conduct the interviews. But overall, it was a good approach, because, as I mentioned during my presentation, it really allows us to get some additional information and to really strengthen the project. And yeah, that was the main point.
Idrissa, did you have something to add? Oh, you're on mute, Idrissa.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I will just try to add first response element to the question of moral related to the local knowledge skills and how we integrate it on our approach. In Senegal, as Alun said previously, we conduct the PERC during during our FRMC as part of our FRMC approach. So we conducted the two study at the same time, and we had chance to use knowledge gather from the FRMC approach. And for this one, it was we use too many participatory approach, work with communities, and did analyze about their vulnerabilities. We use a MARP tool, so it was really interesting, and all information we gathered during the FRMC process was also useful during the PERC.
Thank you. Okay, Horst, I think you've had your hand up for a bit.
I'm very happy with this whole session. I have a more general remark. This kind of PERC way of documentation is absolutely helpful because we are in general lacking such guidance of how stakeholders should kind of document interact for improvement of before next disaster. And but I want to pose the question for the more general way. In the opening, it was said that there is also documentation from stakeholders or stakeholder groups themselves, or sectoral documentation. This can be scattered. We are also lacking way of merging separate these documentations if they are around. To my experience, stakeholder groups are not very experienced, and there is no general rule how to give incentive to stakeholder groups for this kind of documentation that would absolutely be helpful, not only in the case in the name of the organizers, first aid people, but in supporting all of society with what happened and what maybe could be done better than before. This kind of merging is a work field, and I would be happy, and I can offer to join forces with the stakeholder engagement mechanism of United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction for elaborating principles and supporting make global support for stakeholders for doing such best practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Horst. Did any of our speakers have a comment on that? Okay.
Yeah, maybe I only want to say that, for example, in our case, we have that this will be very useful for stakeholders, no? Because in a meeting that we have in the subnational level in Tabasco, someone said that during the flood, everybody or all the stakeholders were in touch, and after the floods, for example, they don't know anything more about this. No, so I think sharing, of course, these results, this analysis, will help the stakeholders to know what works good and what will be what can be changed to work better. So I think this is a very good insight, and thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Jimena. Okay, we are running up against the time, so we are unfortunately going to have to move on from the questions and answers. What we will do is that our ending slide does have speaker contacts, so feel free to reach out to any of us via email, and we will try to go through the chat and see which questions we haven't been able to answer, and make sure that we can try to respond to all of you. But based on the conversations as well, we did have one more poll, And we're just interested to know if you might be keen to participate in a PERC workshop, kind of a PERC 101 to explore doing a PERC in your own setting. So that could cover a lot of those kind of more logistical questions that we had in the chat. We are at 100% thus far for yes. Love it. Great. Does look like we have immense interest in setting that up. So please do keep an eye out. We will probably try to do that in the next couple months or so. Let's see if we've got everyone. Still adding to the responses. But yep, so and within that workshop, we can also maybe set aside some time for some of these questions as well. And as Karen talked about, we did want to highlight that as of this spring, there are 4 more PERCs that are in progress. So you heard about the Senegal and the Mexico PERC. So those are forthcoming, but we also have products. So full reports and several spin-off shorter products, such as executive summaries and policy briefs from the Western Europe floods that occurred last summer, the Vietnam floods, and then Kuwait as well. So please keep an eye out for those products, and they're available at this floodresilience.net/PERC website. And you will also receive a post-webinar survey via email. So if you could respond to that, as I hope we've highlighted today, we do like learning, so we'd also like to learn how we can do this webinar better and what worked well and what didn't. So if you could fill that out, that would be much appreciated. And then to end, we do have all of the speaker contacts here. So feel free to reach out to any of us and hopefully we can answer some questions. And I think we will leave it at that. We will have a recording of this that we'll share with the slides as well. And thank you, everyone. Obrigada, merci, gracias, for taking the time to learn about the PERC. Have a great day. Thank you.